to abolish property rights is Incoherent, and Azgerod here is taking the opposition. It's going to be normal debate format, just back and forth, no set time limit or moderation, and at the end we'll do the 3-question voting poll. So, since you're taking the affirmative, Footsoldier, if you want to get started, you can go for it. Thanks for debating, guys.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for the introduction. And I didn't prepare an opening statement because I wanted this to be a bit more backwards and forth, a bit free flow, asking some questions and understanding where Azgerod stands on this topic. So, what I would firstly do is just, um,
Footsoldier?
can you hear me?
No.
You can't hear me? Stone, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Maybe it's Azgerod's end.
Yeah, I would guess there's a problem with that.
I local muted him for some reason. Okay.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it. God damn it. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Start again.
So maybe we should start off by just getting on the same page in terms of what communism is. I'm taking the view here, communism meaning like the third stage dialectical process of Marxism. Communism meaning like a moneyless, classless, um, um, stateless society, um, and yeah, and so the type of society that seeks to abolish property rights as well, in that like I can't for example buy a house, own it, rent it out, and charge someone rent, um, because I own it. I can't be capitalist in terms of I've got capital and someone has to pay because I've got the capital. It's a moneyless, classless, stateless society, in the classic Marxist sense. In the sort of the post withering away of the state, as Stalin famously put it, and yeah, so I don't understand how this can possibly be coherent. But before we get into arguing for it or against it, do you agree with my understanding of communism there, Azgerod?
One moment while I look up the definition. We'll see.
Yeah, well, there's going to be various definitions because various different people disagree on what communism is. So you'll
Right.
have
Um,
Russian academics saying that communism is this, and you have Marx saying that communism is that. But for the purpose of the debate, I think because Marxism is the most commonly discussed type of communism, I think it's appropriate for this debate to talk about the third dialectical stage of Marxist communism.
right. So when you say stateless, like, um, maybe this is your point, but I can't see how you can have something be stateless while everything's publicly owned. Like,
Yeah, well, that's part of why it's incoherent, right? Because this is the Marxist position. It's a stateless, moneyless, classless society. Like I'm not straw manning it. Like literally, just like type "stateless, moneyless, classless" into Google, and it will come up Marx. So if you think that that's incoherent, then we're on the same page, and I guess we can end the debate there.
right. Okay, so let's see. I can imagine I can imagine if you have a group of people that agree to where there's no hierarchy in the group, but like they agree to certain laws and things so that like if somebody breaks the rules, they kick them out. Like if there's like a group of friends that have a set of rules for while they play a board game, would you consider that to be a state or not?
If people just get together and agree upon stuff, you can agree upon stuff under anarchy. So you can be an anarcho-communist and agree on stuff. Agreement doesn't entail a state. No.
Okay, so what's the part where like a state comes in? What's the distinction between that kind of group and a state?
Well, the state would just be one centralized body or organization of people who represent the citizens of a land, normally there's not going to be, let's say there's a million people in the country, there's not going to be a million people part of the state, right? There's going to be like some smaller amount of people running the state.
Mhm.
That's sort of like the classic understanding of it. We can go into like, we can Google definitions if you want, but I think we both understand what is meant by state. Like, I'm not like trying to pull any like bizarre definitions here for the purpose of this debate. Like,
Mhm.
uh, so
Okay,
yeah, what's your point there?
right. Okay, so if you have if you have a group of people and they get together a police force of people and they just have like kind of a weird militia thing that they agree upon. This is the police force. These are the people who go around and enforce the rules that we've all agreed upon. Would you consider that to be a state or not?
Well, then you're basically just doing a psoriasis paradox at this point. So you're saying, okay, well, we can have an anarcho-communist society where people just agree to help each other out and stuff. But now we're not just getting a bunch of people like the friendly neighbors in the neighborhood with a few shotguns or whatever. But now we've actually organized into one single police force. We've now got uniforms which say Polizei on them, and then we're going to go around police in the streets. Or at that point, you've now just invoked police force, and that's the state, right?
So it's like it's a state, even if it's just like so I'm imagining like a village of people that have different roles, and some of them are butchers, and some of them, are tanners, and some of them are doctors, et cetera, et cetera. And some of them are the people that go around with cudgels and make sure people don't break the rules. Like for you, like everything else is fine, but as soon as we have the people with cudgels that are assigned to that role, now it's a state.
Well, if you've got like various different competing organizations of police forces, then that's fine. That's compatible with anarchy, but it's not compatible with communism because where's the motivation for your competing? Like you can't have like competing businesses of private security forces under anarcho communism. You can under anarcho capitalism, but not under anarcho communism because it's a moneyless, stateless, classless society. So without class, without state, and without money, how are you going to have these private security forces competing?
Yeah, no, I don't mean like a private security force. I just mean like, let's say like you get together your in your democratic like communistic council or something, and everybody gets together and your little village, they decide, okay, Steve's going to be the sheriff of the town or something, and he's going to go around and make sure that people don't break the rules that we agree upon here. Is that a state now or?
Yeah, well, what you've done is you've now made a sheriff of the town. So you've now made a central authority figure, which is ruling over other people and making sure that other people abide by the rules. It's not simply everyone getting together and being like, look, we all agree that if you walk on my grass, I'm going to blow your head off with a shotgun or whatever. It's like, no, we're actually, we're now divesting power to a central figure in
Yeah.
order to do this function in society, and now you've made the rudimentary starting point of the state, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I get you. Okay. So now I understand what the claim is and stuff. I think yeah. I still disagree with you. So what do you think the contradiction is?
Um, so incoherence can be both a contradiction and also a failure to convey something in an intelligible way, and it's a combination of both. I can come up with both a contradiction, and I just don't understand how we can have such a society. So on one hand, you're saying any example, and I'm not going to hold you to this, you can come up with another example, but in this first example you gave, it was, we've got our stateless, classless, moneyless society, and then we've got a sheriff, and now we're basically having a state. So then it's a state and it's not a state at the same time. I'm not saying that's your position, but I'm just saying
Hmm.
that for your first example, that would be an example of self contradiction. Um, but we can tackle this maybe in a more streamlined way. So I could just ask you, in this classless, moneyless, stateless society where property ownership is abolished, can I own food?
No.
I can't own food.
Nope.
Because if I can't own food, then I don't understand how my life could be my own. Because if someone else owned the food, or if no one owned the food, there was no ownership over the food, then no one owns the food which goes into their body. And seeing as people are made up pretty much, you're essentially, you are what you eat, essentially. So you are made up of the food. You don't even own your body, because the building blocks of your body, like, no one owns that, right? So nothing is owned. You can't even own your own body at that point. So if and then in this society, this moneyless society, I can't trade, I can't work, I can't offer my labor and work in order to get food, for example, because no one owns food, no one can own food. So it's of no benefit or use to anyone in this society to offer their time or their labor or their skill or anything in order to get more food or to get more of anything, because no one can own not even food. So if that is the case, I don't own my own actions. I don't own my own bodily integrity in a way. Like, it's like no one owns anything at that point. And if that's the case, then even my actions are not owned by myself. So I abolish free will in a way, because now it's some collective ownership of everything. So, for example, a rapist in the society, he wouldn't. This person wouldn't have done wrong. It would have been the society had done wrong, and this person was also a victim. Like the rapist was also a victim of the society having wronged the, this person, having brought this person up in a wrong way. So now that he does something which is against the will of the collective, so actually it's not his fault. He's another victim. And so once you abolish responsibility and free will in this way, then it would mean that no one would have any responsibility, motivation, or incentive to create and harvest and consume food. So they would starve and die. But where people don't starve and die, generally, like if you look at North Korea, the most authoritarian communist dictatorships in the world, you can see that people generally try and grow food. They don't just randomly just like sit there and starve and die. So there's a performative contradiction between that people do have the responsibility and people do have the sense of ownership over the food, contradicting with this entailment that responsibility and impetus of the individual is abolished in favor of this collectivism. So the individualism of the performance of the individual is performing this individualistic mindset, which is in contradiction to the collectivist ideology of this type of communism. So there's a performative contradiction there as well.
Okay. Yeah, I don't agree that about your characterization of like ownership of food and your the cells in your body and stuff like that. Like I would say that like you can't own food. You can have like a usage right for the food, which just basically means like you were assigned the food to eat, right? But you don't own it, which means like you're not allowed to like store it and then sell it to somebody. You're not allowed to like keep it and pass it on to your grandkids or something. Like you have it, you're given it for a specific purpose. You're supposed to eat it so you don't starve or something. And if you don't use it or something, you're supposed to give it back when you die, that kind of thing, right? It would be like a usage right. But if you have such a usage right and then you put it into your body, right? That doesn't mean that like now you own the food. Like at a certain like when it enters your body, I wouldn't consider that like we're not the rule isn't applied anymore. Like we're not claiming to have control over what over the stuff in your body. Like when communists say we're going to abolish property rights, they're not talking about your body. They're not saying you don't own your kidney. They're saying you don't own like a chair that you make in service of the community. You don't own like the food that we grow and things like that. If you get something from the community, that doesn't mean you own it, right? The claim isn't that you like don't own the hairs on your head. I mean, I don't know whether or not you'd call that ownership anyway, because it's like you are you. You don't own you. You are you. But the claim is nobody claims to make it so that you don't own your own physical body. I don't think.
Yeah, well, this is a logical entailment of communism when you seek to abolish property rights. So the common response to this is, oh, well, we're not going to abolish all property rights, so we're going to actually make a distinction between possessions and property. And so that's the trick that they normally do, because if you don't create this distinction, then you are like logically entailed down this path of, if you don't even own the food that you eat, you don't own anything, you're not allowed to trade, you're not allowed to do any of this stuff, then you don't own yourself, because it's like you're a slave at that point. Slaves don't own themselves. That's like the idea of slavery, right? So like this is something that you might get similar things in the literature. For example, Hayek with his Road to Serfdom and stuff like this. Like when you look into the grounding of property rights, you'll see that this is a very big problem for Marxist communism, and that's hence this distinction that people come up with property versus possessions. So would you take this property versus possessions sort of like angle on the matter, or would you just reject some of the grounding around property rights?
Um, I'm not familiar with the possessions versus property argument. My problem is just that like I don't view my body parts as property. It's not stuff, it's me. So I wouldn't consider like if I eat something and then it transforms into part of me, I don't consider that to be it's still like a possession that other people have, like that other people are discussing, like, oh, when you die you have to give your, it's not it's not the same thing, right? Your body parts aren't what people are talking about when they're talking about property rights. It's just not part of the claim. Like you can misread what they say or like strawman them into seeming like people are claiming that you should that the collective or something should own your body parts, but that's not what I've heard anybody saying, and that's certainly not what I'm claiming, right? I'm just claiming that like it's not incoherent to say that you don't own material possessions and like property in the sense that everybody means it, which is like chairs and shit, right?
Well, this is a bit of a problem because I think the grounding is such that when we talk about possessions, like what in the world do you own? We normally start off by saying, "Well, I own my own body," and that's the whole point about slavery. If you start off with the only thing in the world which you automatically have a birthright to own, your own body, if you start off by denying that right, then that's how you get slavery. That's literally what slavery is, right? So
Right, that's not what I'm saying though. I'm saying that in fact what you do quote unquote own, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but the only thing that you like have that permanent unalienable right over is your own body. Yeah.
right. So that means if you do have this inalienable ownership over your own body, then you can do with your body what you want because you own it. So in that case,
No.
what? So you can't do what you want with your own body.
No, not if it breaks the rules. That's the point of rules.
Well, the point of rules is, like for example, you could say one of the rules are you can't harm another person, or you can't dishonor a contract, which is harming another person, or you can't do any number of things which harm other people. But you can't make a rule and say I must I must walk 5 miles a day or something like this. You can't compel me to do things that I don't want to do when there's no like when there's no victim or something, like, because if you're doing that, then that's like slavery, right?
Well, no, I mean, any control over another person can be construed as slavery, but laws can be like commanding as well. They don't have to be just restrictions. They can also be commands to do certain things, right? Like you can say you have to do a certain amount of work. You have to whatever the group decides you work on, that's what you work on. If you agree to that, then while you're in the community, you have to do that, right? And what that means is it's enforced, right? So if you break that rule, then you get kicked out. You're not a slave. They don't own you, right? You can leave whenever you want. But as a part of this group, that's the rules that you're agreeing to. So it does constrict your actions in a certain way, but it's conditional, right? It's not absolute, like absolute control over you, and that like you just physically can't break the rules. It's that if you break the rules, then the rest of the group will, enforce them.
Well, what you're saying there is if I break the rules or I don't want to agree to the rules of this communist society, for example, if I want to start my own business, that's against the rules, then I'm going to get kicked out of the society. But so you're saying that I'm going to resolve my problems by ostracization. So you're in essence you're saying that communism doesn't have this problem you're talking about because we solve it by removing the problems from communism by literally expelling people who present the problem. But that sort of what's the word? It's I can't call the exact fallacy, but it's you're essentially
There is
performing a
none.
little dance where actually no, the issue is self-contained. So if we just say the world goes communist, so you're advocating for world communism. Like where are you gonna eject this individual? You're gonna eject them into space. You're gonna put them on
Sure.
like yeah,
I'm
but
not
that's just killing them. That's synonymous with killing someone,
sure.
right? So what you've just painted is an example of it. Let's say, for example, in this communist society, you must produce 1 ton of wheat per whatever time period, and if you don't do that, we're going to kill you.
Yeah, if you make it so that I have to be arguing for global communism and there's no way of sending them outside of the world safely, yeah.
Yeah, that's serfdom.
Uh, Not really. I mean, sure, like that. Okay, sure. Like if you want to call this serfdom, then fine. But it's not a contradiction. But also, it's I don't have to. I'm not in any way obligated to take the position that I'm advocating for global communism, right? Uh, I'm not even advocating for communism at all, right? I'm just talking about some village, some communistic village or whatever, can say that you're not allowed to own material property, or right, you're not allowed to have property rights in the sense that it's meant, which means you're not allowed to own objects or people or things like that, right? You can have that happen and it's not contradictory, right? And this argument that you're making, like where it's like, okay, you're constraining other people through rules and stuff, sure, but that's not ownership. That's not owning them. They can still own themselves while you're saying you have to do these things or we kick you out of the society. Of course.
Right. So, but by saying you have to do X, otherwise we're going to kill you.
No, well, no, we're not saying kill you.
Sorry.
We're not saying kill you, right? We're just saying we'll kick you out, or perhaps we'll put you through some rehabilitative program so that you're not breaking the rules, or we'll put you in prison for a little while, or we'll give you 10 lashings or something, right?
Right. But the problem with this is what you're saying is that people own their own bodies, but someone else, some other force, whether it's the state, and if it is the state, then you're in incoherence because it's a stateless society.
Yeah.
And if it's just the collective as a whole, like anarchistically enforcing obedience in society, then you're saying that the collective as a whole um, have ownership over your actions. They're compelling you to do a certain thing, just like a slave doesn't own their own body. It's owned by the collective. And if you don't do what you're obligated to do by the collective, then you're punished like a slave. The slaves don't
Well,
own their own body.
okay, let me ask you this, Footsoldier. So are you a slave because, like, if you say the N-word a million times in General Saloon, you get kicked out of Arthuria?
No, because like Arthuria is not gonna like enact like physical violence on me, like in real life, and compel me to do certain things, or like subject me to violence, or like threaten to kill me, or threaten punishment. Like it's a different state of affairs, right? Like this is a private, not private, but like a um, an independent,
It's
different
digital, I think,
country.
is the difference here.
Well, not even digital. Like, for example, if I went to a book club and then I got naked and started screaming, they might say, look, you're not welcome at our book club, go away. But if the book club said, oh no, you have to come to the book club once a week, otherwise we're going to come around to your house with baseball bats and smash your kneecaps in, then that's something altogether different.
No, what about the real example is you go into a book club and you start like stealing shit and breaking things and they say you have to leave and they like forcibly move you out if you refuse. Like, is that slavery?
Well, that's not a communist society. That's like a
Okay,
micro
right.
a
Yeah, yeah,
micro
yeah.
community, or an establishment. But
So
yeah, they
no, I
can
mean, there's so much
can
as nothing
remove
like
you.
size. Why would we care? Like, to give it a more like compelling analogy, I guess. Like, if you go into the bookstore and they say, okay, while you're here, you have to read books and you have to look around and you have to be trying to buy things. If you just come in here and chill and like slouch around and like take up our heating and whatever, if you're just bumming around, then you have to leave, right? They say if you come into our society, you have to actually contribute to the society. You have to uh, be interested in performing transactions with us in the case of the bookstore. And if you don't, then you get kicked out, right? Is that slavery? No, it's just a contract. It's an agreement.
Well, what you're saying is in your society, where people don't produce 1 ton of wheat per X time period, you you don't just like kick them out. You'd have to punish them, right? So let's say like this country.
Disagree.
Sorry.
I disagree. You don't have to punish them. You can just kick them out.
Well, so this society that you're saying, this coherent society that you're arguing for, instantly deports anyone who breaks any rule.
Sure.
Okay, that's a bit weird. It's not. It's not fatal.
No, so it's not incoherent, is it?
No, it's not. That's not incoherent. But what I'm saying is, uh, the society will still contain contradictions. So the ones that I've just gone through before. So at the book, you give an example of this book club that you go to. Let's say this book club was book club land, and it's like the whole of the world is this book club land. And
Yeah, but not the whole of the world, right? Because now you're setting it up so that if I kick them out of our group, they die, which makes it sound more like serfdom, which serves your argument. But like, I don't know where you're getting that from. It's a book club. It's not the entire world. We don't have to eject people into space to kick them out of the book club.
so when you're arguing now this proposition, you weren't just raising the hypothetical. You're now saying that a book club can be an example of communism. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm still working with the hypothetical.
Okay, because now I'm confused. Because on one hand, because what I'm trying to get at, I'm trying to relate it back to a political ideology. So a political ideology isn't the same thing as a book club. Like you can have a book club community, right? But this is distinct from communism. I think if you want, we could like we could go there as well. But I think it's a bit of a red herring. What we really want to talk about in this debate is the political ideology of communism in the Marxist sense that we talked about at the start. If we're now like trying to get micro communities like book clubs and then saying, oh, it's not incoherent here because they can just leave the shop or whatever, it's not the same as if you've got an entire country with millions of people. And then the second
Right.
that anyone does anything, they have to be ejected from society.
No, that's fine too. That works just as well as the book club. Like that is actually what I'm talking about, is a system of government where you have a whole country that is under this, and if somebody breaks the rules within the country, then they get kicked out of the country and they get repatriated to another one, for example.
Yeah, I'm just eating my burrito here.
Sure.
Last talking to you. Yeah, so you would have to instantly deport anyone who broke any rule, no matter how trivial.
I don't know if you'd have to, but I'm fine with that for the sake of the argument.
Okay. Well, it still entails contradictions because who is going to do the deportation?
Just the people, the random undelegated people in the society, all the people who have this kind of like group collective contract with one another. Each person who comes in says, hey, I agree to all these rules that everybody has democratically decided upon. They're the ones that kick them out. Just the neighbors who recognize that they're breaking the rules or something.
So these neighbors literally like put this person in handcuffs and marches them 200 miles to the border.
If that's what's necessary, I guess, yeah, sure.
So you think that there would be sufficient motivation for everyone in society to act this way?
No, I'm just saying that it's not contradictory. I'm saying it's possible.
Well, it is. There's another performative contradiction here because you're saying
Performative contradiction? What is that?
performative contradiction is if I say, for example, I am currently not talking to Azgerod, that's a performative contradiction because what I'm performing is contradicting. It's not logically contradictory in this way of me saying the statement I am currently not talking to Azgerod is not logically contradictory in some way. It's only contradictory because it's performatively contradictory. Because what I am doing right now is talking to Azgerod. So me saying that I'm not doing that constitutes a performative contradiction.
Okay, so you're saying like a performative contradiction is like something that's inconsistent with reality. Is that right?
Inconsistent with my actions.
Oh, so if I just say that something's if I say that like X is good but I don't do X, then that's a performative contradiction or something?
You could make a point like that, but it's more like, for example, if you're driving a car and you say I'm not driving right now, then that's a performative contradiction.
Right, so lying about your actions, I guess.
Not necessarily lying. It could also just be like you could say, for example, you could drive a car and say, I really like banana ice cream or something. You're not making a performative contradiction because it's not like you're vomiting at banana ice cream. You're driving a car. You're not doing anything to do with banana ice cream. So when you lie and say that you really like banana ice cream, there's no performative contradiction there. You're just lying. But if you are driving a car and say, I'm not driving, or if you're walking down the street and say, I'm driving a car, that's a performative contradiction.
Okay, so again, lying about your actions, lying about like what you're doing right now.
Yeah, like lying about what you're currently performing. So if I'm
Right.
performing talking to Azgerod, saying that I'm not talking to Azgerod is a performative contradiction.
Yeah, okay. I feel you. I'm not sure that this is really a contradiction of any kind in the sense in which we usually mean contradiction. It's certainly not like incoherent. It's just like somebody lying.
No, it is incoherent because if you say blah 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 means that I'm not talking to Azgerod right now, and but I am talking to you, then I'll be like, I don't understand what you're actually meaning by this. Like when you say blah 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 is the case right now, I'm saying yeah, but if that means that I'm not talking to you, but I am talking to you, I don't understand what you're trying to say. Am I talking to you?
Well,
Or am I not talking to you? It's just
this is
confusing.
perfect.
It's incoherent.
It's perfectly coherent. They're lying.
It's not coherent, man.
That is exactly coherent. People lie all the time. I know exactly what's going on there.
It's no look. We can Google this if you want. Like, you can Google this right now. Is a performative contradiction an example of incoherence? And there's arguments based upon this. Like for example, who's that philosopher? Obviously, Hopper's argument is based on performative contradictions, argumentation ethics. But you got, was it Habermas? Or I forgot his name. And a whole bunch of people making this same argument. It's
Yeah.
like in the academic, it's in the philosophical literature, man. It's
Right.
not like saying I'm just pulling out my ass.
No, I mean, I hope they make the argument better than you do, because when you say it, it doesn't make sense. I mean,
Well, you understand now what performative contradiction is.
yeah,
And
I
so
just
you're
don't think it's a form of incoherence.
well, it is, because if you right, so are you saying it's perfectly coherent? You can understand, you can make a proposition. Let's say the proposition is, I'm not talking to you right now. Is that proposition true?
No.
But is the proposition, I'm not talking to you right now, in isolation true?
In isolation, I would say no, but I'm not sure what you mean by in isolation. Isolated from what exactly?
Is it self-contradictory, that proposition?
No.
So it could be true or false.
Yeah.
So, but my performance of that is false.
Yeah, like we know that it's a false statement, yeah,
So
because of what's going
we
on.
have that performance of the proposition is false, but we have the proposition could be true. So, like, now we've got a contradiction.
Right. Like I mean, this is it's false. I mean, if I just say like the Earth is flat, I mean, like the proposition on its own isn't internally contradictory, but it's false because it doesn't cohere with reality. Sure.
Let me put this another way. Let me put this in a liar paradox. So, do you know what the liar paradox is?
Yeah, this statement is false.
Right. Is it true that this statement is false?
I forget what the resolution to this is. It's indeterminate, I think. It's something like it's something like 1 divided by 0 or something like that. I'm not sure. I don't know how to resolve that.
The reason it's a
Like,
paradox.
yeah, you could say it's incoherent. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's different types of paradoxes. There's like falsidical paradoxes, there's veridical paradoxes, and a liar paradox, depending on who you ask, it is going to be a true paradox. You can resolve it using like tasking logic and stuff like this, but at the end of the day, the statement is sort of like you don't know whether it's true or false, because this statement is false. You could say, okay, well, that's true then. But if the statement is false, then it's false. So it can be both true and false. So it's incoherent in the performative aspect of it. So if you just read it and don't take the performative implication of the sentence, it's not a contradiction. But when you take the performative commitments of the sentence, now we've got an incoherence, and you agree with that, right? So it's exactly the same. When I say to you right now, I'm not talking to you, right? It's I am talking to you. So I am talking to you, and but I say I'm not talking to you. So it's like there's P and there's not P, and there's P, which is the given proposition, but then there's not P, which is the performed proposition. So there's an incoherence there.
No, I mean it's false. It's not like on the one hand, you've got like just a false statement, which is false. It's contradictory with reality. It's not self-contradictory, and it's coherent. Then you've got another, and you say that this is a performative contradiction. Then you've got another example, which is the liar paradox, which is an actual paradox where it's neither true nor false. Because if you say it's true, then it's false, and if you say it's false, then it's true. And you say that this is a also a performative contradiction. You say because one's a performative contradiction, the other's a performative contradiction. One's a paradox, the other's a paradox. One's incoherent, therefore the other's incoherent. It just doesn't work because one's not incoherent.
Right. So if I say to you right now, let's just go through it one last time before we go to the SEP, and I have to wash my hands because I've got beans over my hands. So if I say I'm not speaking to you right now, let's call that P1. I'm not speaking to you right now. Right, that's P1. P2 is the fact that like the performance that I'm currently doing, like my performance is I am currently speaking to you right now. So we have two propositions. P1, I am not speaking to you right now. P2, I am speaking to you right now. Do you agree that that is an example of P and not P?
Yeah.
Right, so if I give you P and not P, is that coherent?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's like
P and not P
I'm
is
not.
coherent.
I'm not sure. So coherent is internally contradictory, I think we're saying. So no, it wouldn't be because it's internally inconsistent.
Right. So performative contradiction, such as I'm not talking to you right now, is incoherent.
Well, no, because it's not internally inconsistent, it's externally inconsistent because like the action isn't part of the claim, right?
Yeah, but that it's not the case that something must be logically contradictory only, exclusively, in order to be considered incoherent.
I get what you're saying, but like I just don't agree. I mean, it's entirely understandable and coherent for somebody to say something that is false. So there's nothing incoherent about that. Now, like saying that you're now like trying to merge the boundaries between like internally and externally consistent by saying premise one is like, I am talking to Footsoldier. Premise two is the action that I'm not, like talking to Footsoldier or whatever. Like, but actions aren't premises. Actions aren't propositions, right? Like you'd have to make the second proposition be an actual proposition, and then it would be part of the claim, and then it would be internally inconsistent, and then it would be incoherent. But if you're just making the claim, I'm not talking to Footsoldier, and then you have this external fact, which is that you are talking to Footsoldier, that's not internally inconsistent, it's externally inconsistent. And so it's not incoherent.
Okay, well, you're just saying something which is considered not to be the case in the philosophical literature, right? So we can just type in performative contradiction. First thing that comes up is Wikipedia. Performative contradiction arises when the propositional content of a statement contradicts the presuppositions of asserting it. An example of a performative contradiction is the statement "I am dead," because the very act of proposing it presupposes the actor is alive.
Right. So you actually totally misrepresented what that is then, right? It's not that you're just like contradicting with your words what's actually going on or what you yourself are doing. It's that it is internally inconsistent because you saying the claim presupposes something that contradicts what you're claiming, right? By saying like
It's the same thing, right? So
it's not the same thing.
no, if I say I am not talking to you right now, that is a proposition, and the fact that I am talking to you right now is another proposition. We have P and we have not P, and taken together, that's in essence what a contradiction is, and is the like classic understanding of incoherence.
No, I mean that's just not the case. I mean incoherence is like internal contradiction, right? It's unintelligibility. You can't tell what's being said. It's a paradox because it implies its falsehood, right? That's what like incoherent means. But if I just
does that not imply it's falsehood?
Sorry?
Does it not imply it's falsehood when I say I'm not
Yes.
talking to you right now?
No, it doesn't. No,
Yeah,
of course not.
really?
No, of course not. It's not internally inconsistent. It's externally inconsistent. It's not like you just saying I am not talking to Azgerod right now. That statement in it of itself doesn't imply its own falsehood, so it's not inconsistent. You need to look at the external reality, which is that you are talking to me, in order to realize that it's false. But it's not internally inconsistent. That's externally inconsistent. That's a difference between like you clearly misunderstand what that means.
Even if I was to grant you that performance is some type of external inconsistency, it's still not problematic for the idea that a performative contradiction is still a contradiction. The clue is in the name.
Agreed.
Dude.
Like if I say I'm not talking to Footsoldier right now, it's not, my statement isn't a contradiction, but there is a contradiction that exists when I say that, right? It's a contradiction between what I'm saying and reality, and so my statement is false. So you could argue that maybe the statement of like we're going to do X within communism is false if you can say that it's impossible, but you can't claim that it's incoherent.
Well, an example of incoherence would be, in this case, your society is stateless, moneyless, classless, but you have classes, you have a state, and you have money. And then it would be the performance within communism is such that it contradicts what is
No,
asserted as communism.
no. So if you have some like political theorists who come along and they say, okay, communism is this thing, and I want to do this, and we're going to do this, and this state that we have here, this is communism. And you look at the state, and it's just not fucking what they said, right? It's got a state, it's got money, it's got classes. This is an external contradiction, but their original statement that this state is communist is not incoherent unless a state being communist entails that it does have a state and does have classes and does have money. Like that's what an internal contradiction is, or that's what a performative contradiction is like if something is communist, then it's not communist because of the fact that it like just saying, well, actually that's not a performative contradiction, that's just an internal contradiction. But like that's not what's going on here.
So what you're arguing is me saying to you right now that I'm not talking to you is not a performative contradiction. Is that your point right now?
Definitely. It's definitely not a performative contradiction, and it's also not even an internal contradiction at all, right? It's an external contradiction.
Okay, because I just think you're wrong, right? So I don't know how we proceed here. Like, how do we proceed?
Let me just briefly like describe what a performative contradiction is, right? So performative contradiction, right, is when I make a claim and the fact that I made this claim implies that the claim is false. That's what a performative contradiction is I make claim and the fact that I'm making the claim implies that the claim is false. So therefore it's not that the claim itself is internally inconsistent, it's that any person who makes the claim necessitates its falsehood, right? That's what a performative contradiction is.
I think what you're doing is because like what's happening here is I have been working with the concept of performative contradictions for months, and to start this conversation you didn't know what one was. I read the Wikipedia page, and now what you've done is you've seen this one example and you're thinking that everything else is not a performative contradiction. But in fact, like that's just one example. Like me not talking to you right now is literally like a classic example of performative contradiction. So when you're saying it's not performative contradiction, I don't know what to do. It's like you're just saying P and P are not P and not P is not a contradiction or something. Well, it's like yes, it is. I don't know what to do to change your mind.
But you're just wrong. Like let me just read the Wikipedia. It says a performative contradiction arises when the propositional content of a statement contradicts the presuppositions of asserting it. If I say, I am not talking to Footsoldier, what propositional content is contradicting the presuppositions of my statement? What are the presuppositions?
Your presuppositions of that is that there's talking happening and it's happening directed to me, right? That there's nothing else to be presupposed in this.
No,
like, for example, if you talk about algebra, then you're presupposing the rules of algebra. But when you're talking about I am talking to Footsoldier, then all you're doing is presupposing like the world that we live in and the condition which is being portrayed in the proposition. That is true.
No, if I say I'm talking to Footsoldier, me claiming that I'm speaking or that there's talking going on, me claiming that I'm talking to you in particular, those aren't presuppositions. Those are the content of the proposition. The only presuppositions that are going on are things like I exist, Footsoldier exists, things like that, things that are implicit in what I'm saying, not things that are directly, explicitly the content of what I'm saying, right?
I see what you're saying, but I really think you're wrong at saying that I'm not talking to you right now is not a performative contradiction. My performance contradicts the propositional content. Right? That's literally what a performative contradiction is.
It's not.
According to Wikipedia, it's saying the axiomatic the axiomatic content is in contradiction with the propositional content, but or there's no possible way that the propositional content could be true because it's axiomatically ruled out. But it's presupposed, right? So with propositional content, you could also say that presupposed in a proposition is its truth, right? So if I say that,
That's definitely not true.
yeah, no, if I say I'm talking to you right now, that's
No.
that's true. But if I have a proposition, I'm not talking to you right now, right? And you put both at the same time. One is performative and one is propositional. Then they contradict each other, and there's an incoherence there. I don't care if you want to say, oh, maybe there's no axiomatic justification going on here and it's external or something. That's literally what performative contradiction is. I'm trying to find some sources, but
There aren't any, because that's not what it is, man. You've gotten the wrong idea in your head.
yeah, but literally you didn't know what it was before the start of this conversation.
Yes, but I have so much better reading comprehension, apparently, that I can pick it up from 12 seconds of looking at the Wikipedia page. I don't know what to tell you. It literally says, it's
Yeah,
where
it only gives
propositional content,
one example, man. I'm trying to
but it's
find a
not.
more academic source and not just Wikipedia.
Okay, so first you're like, okay, so what you're saying directly contradicts Wikipedia, source Wikipedia, and then you're saying, oh shit, Wikipedia disagrees with me. Fuck.
No, I don't think it does disagree with me. It just gives one example, and you're nailing down this one example, and it's
No, I'm
not
not even looking at the example. Like, I'm not looking at the I am dead example. I'm literally not. I'm looking at the theoretical statement that it makes at the start, right? It says that it arises when a propositional content of a statement contradicts the presuppositions of asserting it. I'm not looking at the I am dead example. I'm looking at the theoretical definition of a performative contradiction. And that tells me that what the example you're giving of, like, I'm talking to Footsoldier, that's not a performative contradiction. You saying that, like, me being in a communist society and saying it's communist and it not being communist, that's not a performative contradiction. That's an external contradiction. The internal contradiction or the performative contradiction would arise if me saying that it was a communist society necessitated that it wasn't a communist society. But anyway, I think we've said what we need to say here.
No,
You can
I think
look up your sources afterward.
I don't think that's correct, dude. That's
I know. I know.
so I'm just looking. I'm trying to search, like, the SEP doesn't seem to have an article on it, unfortunately.
Oh,
Maybe
strange.
we'll find the IEP. Yeah, there's no IEP article on it either. But anyway,
Wait,
I
so
don't think we need to get hung up on specifically performative contradiction, because it doesn't matter if you think that this is, if we disagree on what performative contradiction is, it doesn't even matter anyway, because at the heart of the disagreement, we're not, the debate isn't about disagreeing on what performative contradiction is. The debate is the idea that there's some incoherence there, and we don't need to use some terminology that we're finding contentious right now. We can just use other terminology to clear this up. So let's just abandon that for a minute. And so if I have a proposition, and then my performance of the proposition is the negation of the proposition, am I able to completely understand what's happening there? Am I able to say therefore X? So for example, if I say P, not P, can I say therefore anything?
I think if you say P and not P, you can say literally anything. Am I wrong?
Well, you're talking about the principle of explosion there, but
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah. Am I justified in my conclusion if I say P and then not P?
P, like therefore not P? Is that what you mean?
If I say premise one, and then premise two is the negation of premise one, and then I have
Yeah.
a conclusion, am I just is that can that be sound? Is there a case where that could possibly be true?
No, it can't possibly be sound because your premises are necessarily false.
Right. So now, if I have a proposition, and then I have a proposition which is formed from the performance aspect, and I do exactly the same thing. You're now saying, oh, magically it's okay. Magically I have.
Magically. The thing is, right, is that your performance isn't part of the claim, right? So it's not an internal contradiction. It's not an incoherence. Incoherence only arises when the statement itself contains incoherence, when it itself is incoherent, not when like you say one thing and do a different thing, so therefore everything you say is wrong. Like that's not what incoherence means.
So therefore, that this situation, like for example, if you came up to me and said, um, you said, for example, I want to be really peaceful. Let's not do anything violent here. And then you started like punching me.
Yeah.
Is that a clear, understandable thing going on there, or does that result in some kind of confusion?
Um, it's slightly less understandable because it's like it's not a clear-cut lie because it sounds like it would be more like psychosis or some being insane. But like no, I can understand that. Like their claim in and of itself was not at all contradictory, right? Like them
So,
just
so,
saying
so what's happening? What's actually happening there then? Is the person being violent or is the person being not non-violent?
violent.
Okay, but he's assuring you that he's being non-violent.
Yes, he's lying. He's saying a falsehood anyway.
Oh, but he's not lying. He's convinced.
Okay, so he's saying a falsehood.
So, but not knowingly. Like in his reality, he's trying to be non-violent, right? And from his perception, he's just sort of like just being sort of that's what he does, sort of thing. Like the punching is sort of like friendly or whatever. It doesn't think it's actually hurting you, but he is. So in his world, he's actually not being violent, right?
Okay, sure.
So is it clear whether he's being violent or not?
No, it's ambiguous what you mean by the question.
So it's incoherent whether this person is violent or
Yeah, I guess so. Like if you just say this person is violent, it's well, no, it's more like the context matters of the statement, right? It's like if you say like, do you love black people or whatever, right? It's like it's something where like you have to give a qualified response, right? But it's not incoherent to say that that they're being violent, right? Because it's pretty clear like which sense in which you're saying that they're violent, right? It's just like it's a different context. There's a qualification there. They're being violent from my perspective, or they're being violent in reality, as opposed to they're being violent in their like imagination or whatever. That's what I'd say there. I'm not sure. I don't see it as being incoherent. No.
so if let's change it then. So because you're flip-flopping backwards and forwards a bit there. So let's make
All right.
another example. See if you have a different response.
Yeah.
So let's say that there is this guy who works as like a racial equality campaigner or something, and he's like um, super into social justice, and all of his friends know that he's like into social justice and all this sort of stuff. Um, would you find it coherent to see this person at a KKK meetup?
Yes. What do you mean?
Do you fully understand what's going on there? There's no contradiction. There's
Well,
no.
no. I mean, it's not that I fully understand everything that's going on there, but it's that it's not. There's nothing contradictory.
Right. I think what's happening in this debate now is we've been derailed from um, the actual substance of the debate. We've been derailed into you're now just disagreeing about the nature of what constitutes incoherence, and I don't think we can make progress in this debate because if you're prepared to say that someone who dedicates his life to racial equality, who then goes to a KKK meetup and is um, like, like I don't know, like shouting "kill black people," whatever the hell people do at KKK meetups. Never been to one myself, but if you're now saying that that is somehow completely coherent, there's no contradictory. It's understandable. It's logical. There's nothing contradictory about that. Then I think we should stop the debate there.
Yeah, I think we've said all we need to say, but I'll just make a closing statement. So, like, again, to clarify that last bit, it's not really that I think there's nothing contradictory going on. Like, there's some contradiction in that, like, the claim that this person is for social justice, quote unquote, is contradictory with reality, because they're clearly not, because they're going to a KKK meeting, unless there's some weird espionage going on. Or the fact that they are going to the KKK meeting is contradicted by their being for social justice or whatever. So there is a contradiction there, but it's an external contradiction. Like a person going to a KKK meeting is not contradictory. It's not internally contradictory. It's not incoherent. And a person going to a person being in favor of social justice isn't incoherent, because like there's nothing about being in support of social justice that necessitates you going to KKK meetings, right? So again, just to clarify, my position is that like incoherence is about like their internal contradiction, like something's not understandable, a claim or an idea isn't understandable because it is internally inconsistent. It says A, it says P and not P, right? Communism, as far as I know, has not been shown in this debate to have some kind of internal contradiction. We didn't even show that it has external contradictions. We didn't even get that far, right? But and again, to clarify, like a performative contradiction is when you saying something, like the fact that you're saying something contradicts the content of what you're saying, right? Or the presuppositions of what you're saying contradicts the content. It's not just an external contradiction, right? So yeah, I do think that we disagreed a lot more about the terms than the content, but we certainly have not gotten to any kind of cogent argument for communism's abolishment of property rights being incoherent. So there you go.
Right, yeah, so I guess I'll just quickly wrap up with a closing statement. So we actually were making progress initially on the substance of the debate, and I think I exposed a few examples of contradictions with motivation, free will, food, ownership, bodily autonomy, slavery, and these types of things, as well with the state. So problems with there being a state and there not being a state. We didn't get a chance to drill down on these contradictions more, because then we got derailed into the nature of what incoherence actually is. So that's why I said let's stop there, because if we can't agree on what incoherence is, then we can't discuss it further. I would personally say that someone who dedicates his life to racial equality and then is at a KKK meetup, that's just an obvious example of performative incoherence. Like anyone would say, what are you doing there? That makes no sense. You've dedicated your life to racial equality, now you're at KKK meetup. Like, I don't understand what's happening here. It makes no sense. And that's literally what incoherence means, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be P and not P. Yeah, I've given a whole bunch of examples with P or not P. And we've just not been able to move past this technical understanding of what contradiction is. So maybe we can clear that up in private and then come back to the proposition at a later point, and then we can tackle it in more of a substantive way rather than a meta conversation about what constitutes a contradiction or incoherence. So yeah, thanks for discussing anyway, man, and maybe we can pick it up at a later date.